Hello everyone, this is Savannah Betkowski, Project Assistant at the Syracuse University Environmental Finance Center. On behalf of the Environmental Finance Center Network, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar entitled, Are Your Rates Too High? Looking at Affordability of Water Rates. This session is one of several webinars conducted by the Environmental Finance Center Network for the Smart Management for Small Water Systems project. The EFCN provides training and technical assistance to small public water systems in all 50 states and 5 territories to help local water systems achieve and maintain compliance with the Safe Drinking Water Act. Here you can see the various centers that make up the Environmental Finance Center network, and you can see that the centers are spread all across the country from New York to California. And here you can see the areas of expertise that the EFCN focuses on. Workshops, trainings, and direct assistance are provided on fiscal planning and rate setting, asset management, energy use and efficiency, meeting regulatory compliance, multi-funding coordination, communications and decision-making, water loss reduction, working with other water systems, financing, funding problems, and managing small utilities in a drought. At this point, I will turn the presentation over to our speaker for today. For our session today, we have Stacy Isaac Barazer, a Senior Project Director with the Environmental Finance Center at the University of North Carolina on Chapel Hill. Her main areas of expertise are pricing and affordability of water and wastewater services and financing stormwater management. Stacy, welcome and take it away.
Great. Thank you, Savannah, and hello to everyone on the webinar today. Thanks for joining us. So as Savannah mentioned, this webinar is part of a project that we're calling the Smart Management for Small Water Systems. And in front of you, you should see a screenshot of the website for the project. So you see the URL there, efcnetwork.org. And I wanted to just highlight that for each state and territory, we do have a table that shows some of the major funding sources for water infrastructure projects in that state. So to find those tables, you would go to this URL and sources, you look at the link that says funding sources by state. When you click on that, you will see a map like the one that you see on your screen now. And then you would click on the state that you're interested in. And for that individual state, you will access a PDF table, such as the thumbnail image that you see on the left of your screen. So just one of the general resources offered by this overall project before we get into today's specific topics. I'll talk a little bit more too about my Environmental Finance Center. So as Savannah mentioned, there are several EFCs or Environmental Finance Centers around the country. The EFC that I am affiliated with happens to be the one at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, although I am in a satellite office in the Atlanta metro area of Georgia. But at the EFC, we have several students that work with us on different types of projects. We like to say that one of our taglines at the EFC at UNC is how you pay for it matters. So the way that a community or an organization chooses to fund different environmental projects have different repercussions, let's say. There are educational opportunities, there are policy implications, and that kind of thing. So yeah, you can see a picture here of some of our staff, including our students. And we do applied research, we do teaching and outreach like today's webinar, and we also do some program design and evaluation. So in terms of the topic for today, we're going to be looking at the affordability of water rates. Specifically, we want to look at why affordability programs may be relevant for drinking water systems. And we'll spend most of our time on the second bullet here, excuse me, learning how to determine if there are affordability concerns in your specific service area of your water utility. And then we'll look a little bit at the last item here, which is finding out about some of the latest trends in designing customer assistance programs to address affordability concerns. Throughout the presentation, you'll hear me refer to customer assistance programs. That is a term that's sort of emerging, and it's shortened to CAP. in some areas. So caps is something that you'll see on here as well. And we'll look at some polling questions now, and Savannah's going to launch those for us.
So for our first polling question we have, what kind of drinking water utility do you represent? Please choose from one of the following: for-profit, municipality, not-for-profit, special purpose district, or you are not from a water or sewer utility. And about 10 seconds left for voting. And getting ready to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it looks like the 45% are from a municipality, and it's followed by 33% that are not from a water or sewer utility. All right, back to you, Stacy.
Great. So I believe, do we have a second polling question next here?
Yes, we do. And the second polling question is, what size water system does your utility operate by number of people served? Please choose from one of the following: very small, small, medium, large or very large, or not from a water or sewer utility. And about another 10 seconds for voting. And getting ready to close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 36% are not from a water or sewer utility, followed by 28% large or very large. All right. And it's back to you, Stacy. Oh, sorry, polling question. We have one more polling question. And this polling question asks, does your water system currently provide assistance to customers who don't pay their water bills? Please choose from one of the following. And about 5 more seconds for voting. Closing in 3, 2, 1. And it looks like the majority said no. And that is the last polling question for right now.
Great. Thank you, Savannah. And thanks to the participants for providing that information. It kind of helps to give us some context of who we're speaking with today. Let's see. In terms of an introduction or background on this topic, let's see. Okay. Are your rates too high is the name of the webinar today. And to be honest, the short answer probably is that they're not too high. Most of the systems that we have looked at, their water and sewer rates in some cases where the utility is providing both those types of services, the rates are not too high when you consider the cost of providing the service to the customers. However, there may be a sector of the customers for which the rates are unaffordable. And how large that sector is something that the utilities want to look at in their specific communities. And also maybe this sector, so this little slice of your community is growing. And it could be growing because, one, your rates are increasing as a utility, or those rates, the unaffordable issues could also be increasing because of other aspects of your community life. So maybe income is going down, maybe there's an employer that has left the area that there's a lot of job loss. So for the utilities that are concerned that for a segment of their population, the rates are unaffordable and that segment may be growing, that's kind of what we want to focus on today. But we will say that a lot of the utilities we've worked with, they could do with increasing their rates in order to cover the cost of service or the full cost of providing water service to their customers. So affordability programs or customer assistance programs are increasing. We're seeing more and more utilities kind of developing these type of programs. But besides altruistic reasons and just wanting to do the right thing for your community, there are business case reasons for actually implementing a customer assistance program. So for example, when a customer has trouble paying its bills, there are increased costs to the overall utility. So there's increased arrearages, there are costs involved with late payments, disconnection notices also have a cost to the utility, terminating the service as well. And in some cases, you get the customer back. Maybe you reach the point of actually terminating service, and then the customer is able to pay the reconnection fee and continue being a customer of yours. And then technically, there would be a late service fee that covers that cost of maybe service termination. In a lot of cases, that fee does not cover the entire cost of actually turning off the service. But what if the customer doesn't even come back? So maybe they move in with some relatives and you lose that customer altogether. Then some of these costs, like for example, service termination, are just not recouped by the utility. And so there are these financial bottom line reasons to consider having a customer assistance program. Additionally, folks who are buying bonds, utility bonds, they get nervous when they see large numbers of turn-offs, and so I should say customers turn-offs. So that's something that is not, it's usually a red flag for investors. Now, folks may mean different things when they say affordability. So we wanted to clarify up front what we are talking about on today's webinar when we use the term affordability. We're talking about affordability from the customer perspective, so not the overall financial capacity of the utility. So while those two terms, customer affordability and financial capacity, are related, we see probably too many, while they are related, they are very distinct concepts at the same time. And maybe too often they are confused and combined. So we wanted to kind of tease those two out, make that distinction, and say that today we're focusing on the customer level. And I liked this example from the American Water Works Association's M1 manual. So the M1 manual M1 is just a short way of saying that this manual helps utilities to set their rates and fees. But the text there, the inability of the poorest segment of the customer base to fund its proportionate share of the total cost of the provision of utility services is a nice way of summing up kind of what we're talking about today when we say affordability. Next, we'll look at, so now that we have some context and some background, we'll look at how to determine if there are affordability concerns in your specific service area. And to do that, we're going to demonstrate a tool that the Environmental Finance Center at UNC has developed. Here you see a little bit of a blurry image of the tool, and we call it the Water and Wastewater Residential Rates Affordability Assessment Tool. The best way to find that tool, or any of our tools really, is to go to the main URL for the EFC, so that's efc.sog.unc.edu, and use the search box to put in a few key terms that you're looking for, and really that's the best way to find anything on our website. I'm going to try to show that tool to you right now. So I'm going to switch over here, and hopefully this has been smooth and you can see the EFC's website. So as I was saying, going here and just typing in a couple terms, a couple words such as affordability tool, and this tool is the first thing that comes up. So you would click here, and then you click on this link that says click to download. And it does require registration. And by that, it asks for a few pieces of information. And you can also click on Remember Me so that you don't have to type this in every time. And the purpose of this is, one, we are interested in who out there is using the tools that we are producing at the EFC, but also, for example, last week we updated this particular tool, and so we now have a record of all the folks who have used it and accessed it in the past. And so we'll push something out to those folks saying, hey, there's a new and improved version of the tool. So you do have to fill in a little bit of information. And then you'll get an Excel file that downloads onto your machine. And this is the tool that you will see. So as I said, this is version 1.2, and it was put together earlier this month. in terms of the update. So a few of you on the webinar today may have used this in the past, and you'll see that it looks a little bit different. Essentially there are three worksheets involved in the tool. And the overall goal of the tool, it helps users to enter relevant census data on their particular service community to help assess the affordability of their water and wastewater rates on their residential customers. So again, it's focused on residential customers. The tool allows for a new rate structure to be entered to see how affordability compares from, let's say, the existing rate structure to the next, to the alternative one. You can see here there are three main worksheets: instructions, inputs, and assessment. So the instructions point out things to you like you will be entering information where you see yellow cells, for instance, and it gives you a couple graphics here. One of the things that we want to point out with this tool as well, and you can see this note here, is that you should always consider the financial needs of the utility and the condition of your specific utility's assets while you're addressing affordable rates. Affordability is a concern, and we applaud the utilities that are looking to address that, but don't lose sight of the overall financial needs of the utility. So this is sheet 1, or worksheet 1, the instructions. Then we'll look at inputs. Another way to get to inputs is just to click on this green arrow. So these arrows help you go back and forth between these three worksheets. This tells you it's really important to put a date in, and you can save this onto your hard drive of your machine. You can rename it with the date that you put stuff in, or your initials, or whatever works for you. You put in the name of the utility. So I'll just start typing something here. You have to pick the state. And so we actually don't need to put the state here because we picked the state from a drop-down list. You type the name of the utility, but you pick the state from this drop-down list. There's also a drop-down list, so you can look at water and wastewater combined, or water only, wastewater only. Then you put in the approximate average residential monthly consumption in gallons or cubic feet per month. And there are these red symbols that tell you, you have not entered something properly, or you've left something blank. So you fill in numbers here, and then these little red warnings kind of go away as you complete the information that the tool needs to work. But the most interesting worksheet is this assessment one. Again, here's a warning in red saying that we have not put in all the information that we need. So I don't want you to sit here and look at me fill in the information. I will bring up a completed example to show you. But you will see here, if you don't put in all the necessary information, again, you have these, this red text indicating that something's wrong. All right, so now I brought up an example where we've actually filled out the information. We can go back for a second here too and show with the inputs. This is very important. You don't have to make up these numbers below here. So yes, you do have to decide what is the average gallons per month for your utility for customers in that area, and does not like you to do both gallons per month and cubic feet. So you should know that. You have to pick one. Then really what makes the tool work is you going to the census website, and you can click on this link here. It will take you to this website and help you it will walk you through how to put in information and pull up very specific pieces of data that go into this table. So just so that you can kind of map the pieces of information you need, we have sort of the whole table here that you will see on the census website, and then we've highlighted the ones that you need to enter. So again, if I take one of these out, it says incomplete. So now we're looking at the completed version of the tool. And to get this information, you go again to that census website right here. And these instructions tell you how to type in the name of the community so that you can get to the data that you need. This is the main difference, or one of the main differences in this latest version of the tool, in version 1.2, is that we have, you can look at owner-occupied homes where you exclude renters, and then you can switch that as well. So I guess the way we will describe this second table is that it is optional. Entering this information here is optional, but we really recommend that you enter it. There's a big difference between single-family residential customers of, like, say, detached houses versus folks that are living in, for example, they're renters, let's say. So a lot of these renters would be in apartment complexes, for instance, and so their water usage patterns and in a lot of cases their incomes are very different. And so we think this is a big asset that we've added to the tool, and we encourage folks to try to use that piece. Again, it shows you exactly how to get these certain pieces of data. So then we will jump to sort of the results, so the assessment itself. So what does the tool produce for you when you enter these pieces of information here in the yellow areas? So it looks at various socioeconomic indicators for your community and compares them to state and national averages. So for instance, one of the ways to measure affordability has been this percent MHI. It's the most common indicator. There are some limitations to it, but it's very accessible, and so it just continues to be popular. Here we talk about the percent MHI, and we also talk about some other indicators. So you do get the MHI if that's what you're interested in, but we look at the whole spectrum of income. So MHI, median household income, by definition, would look at the middle income, if you will, in your community. But of course, the folks who are making a lot less than that middle number, such as less than $10,000 a year, they also have to afford water services. And so it's very relevant what these lower income brackets are paying for water, what percentage of their income. So we try to call that out here. Now I should say that this area of red, where we bracket these three groups here and label them low income, is subjective. If for your community you feel like 25,000 to 35,000 should also be considered low income, then feel free to consider, the first 4 rows in this table as opposed to only the first 3. So there is some subjectivity here, and I wanted to point that out. Then you will see a chart like this one here, and you can do some toggling. So this chart right now is showing you current rates, or you can look at the alternative rates that you're considering. You can look at all households, or you can look at homeowners only, where we take out the renters from the distribution. So for example here, what it's telling you is that 36.5% of residential customers in this case are estimated to have had less than $25,000 in annual income. Those households would have spent more than 3.7% of their income under the current rates for water and wastewater bills, assuming 3,700 gallons per month. About 13.5% of households will have spent more than 9.23% of their income. So here we see a substantial number of low-income customers may be living in rental homes and apartments and do not pay for water and wastewater bills. So in most cases with apartment, folks living in apartments, they are paying for water and wastewater as part of their rent. And so that's another reason that we try to pull this out. But if we look at homeowners only, then it takes out those renters. And we don't have to think about the folks where their water and wastewater fees are considered part of their rent. They don't have a separate bill for water and wastewater. So we encourage you to use that feature, although the tool it's supposed to work if you don't fill out the second table, but it really adds a lot of richness to the analysis. So that is a quick overview of this assessment tool, and there are other pieces of information here that you can follow. It kind of gives you some links to other resources about addressing affordability in general. Some of them we'll talk about in the rest of the webinar as well. So I encourage you to take a look at that. And we will jump back into the webinar here. So again, this is how you can find the tool. So the next thing is, if you do this assessment, and usually, to get the data from the census website, that can take it shouldn't take most utilities more than half an hour to complete that tool, maybe 15 minutes even. If you do that assessment tool, you run that analysis and you see from the charts that there might be an affordability concern, then we don't want that to be the end of the discussion. And I should say with the tool as well, if we look at, for example, this chart here, it is a little bit subjective. It's up to the community to decide how high they want these bars to be, and how high, the community is willing to tolerate the unaffordability issue. And maybe you've set certain parameters as a community, as a city or a county, for instance, and you feel like there are too many folks who are facing affordability problems. So you want to address it. So if you do find that there's an issue, how do you address that? And so the second part of the webinar, we want to focus on addressing affordability issues that you may find. So designing customer assistance programs to address affordability concerns is sort of this next section here. First, we wanted to give an overview of some of the elements of designing a customer assistance program. Deciding who gets the assistance is very important and one of the early decisions that any utility looking to implement one of these will have to make. So who gets the help that the utility is going to provide? Deciding what types of assistance to provide is also important. Some communities they elect to provide a one-time discount for hardship or emergency situations. Some elect to provide an ongoing sort of monthly discount on the bill. And other utilities look at doing some sort of water conservation or water efficiency updates to the low-income households so that the bills are lower. And of course, there are utilities that do all of those. And we'll give you some examples, or at least one example going forward. So besides deciding who gets the help and deciding what types of assistance you'll be providing, you also want to plan for program outreach and monitoring. We'll touch on that as well. And then you want to determine how much the customer assistance program will cost your utility and devise a plan to fund that. Now, these are obviously in no particular order, but these are some of the elements that you need to discuss and have planned for before you implement a customer assistance program. So in terms of who gets the assistance, we're looking at eligibility here. Common practices in terms of deciding income eligibility. An overarching recommendation here is to partner with another organization that focuses on low-income services and that kind of thing. Usually these would look like charitable organizations within your community or even different departments within your local government. And the idea here is that their main line of business is to verify folks' income, for instance. And that is not usually the main line of business, especially for smaller water systems. You have a lot of other priorities, and actually checking incomes is not something that you're likely to be specialized in. So we really encourage you to partner with other organizations in your community. Some of the other ways to sort of address this eligibility verification question is looking at other programs. So there are related programs out there like LIHEAP, for instance, the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, where they already have certain criteria. And therefore, if one of your customers, let's say, can verify that they've been accepted into Medicaid or food stamps, etc., any of these here, then one option is to just automatically accept that for your low-income assistance program services. And it saves you having to go through a lot of administrative work here. Wanted to provide this example of a lifeline rate. And so that term can be a little bit ambiguous depending on who you talk with. But usually, lifeline rates really provide assistance to all of your customers. Everyone gets assistance. If you define it this way, so the American Water Works Association, again, Manual M1, has this definition of a lifeline rate. It provides a minimal amount of water at a reduced cost to all customers, regardless of income level or ability to pay. So if we go with that sort of as a standard definition, then really, when you have a lifeline rate, you just have a lower rate than the cost of service for all of the customers, regardless of their income. And so everyone gets assistance in this case. And this is pretty common. We have a lot of utilities tell us this is how they address affordability concerns in their community, by having a lifeline rate. Often some consumption is included in the base charge. So that base charge would be sort of that fixed fee that everyone pays regardless of how much water they use. And oftentimes we see that there is some volumetric consumption amount that's allowed in that base charge. Here's an example from a survey that we did in Alabama. It was produced in June of 2016, and here you can see the consumption allowance, so the monthly consumption allowance that utilities in Alabama were providing for water and wastewater. If we focus on the water here, you see that 93% of water rate structures in the state of Alabama included a minimum consumption amount with the base charge. And you can see how much that was from this chart. In terms of other types of affordability programs, I wanted to show you something from this report. Really, this is a very important thing on this slide, is that the source here was a 2010 study that was funded by the Water Research Foundation. It's called Best Practices in Customer Assistance Programs. This is a really good document. And so as an excuse to bring it into the webinar today, I thought this would be a good table to show you. So they surveyed some utilities and they found this range of assistance that utilities across the country were providing to their customers. So everything from a payment plan, some utilities considered education, in-home conservation assistance. Like I mentioned earlier, there are utilities who part of their CAP program is to go in and, or they contract with plumbers, usually a third-party plumber, to go in and fix leaking toilets, for instance, so that low-income customers are paying for only the water that they need and not water that's being wasted. Special billing arrangements, so this gives you sort of the gamut of types of affordability programs from a very good study that was done a few years ago. I wanted to provide this example from Portland, Oregon as well. Portland has a very long-standing customer assistance program, and it has many different facets to it. So you will see things like, providing ways to reduce your bill, as well as financial assistance. They do a lot with different languages, and where folks in their community may not speak English as their first language, for instance. So this is just one example of a lot of different facets of community assistance program for water. Then we don't want to ignore program outreach and monitoring. So it is sometimes controversial as to whether a utility should go into this whole arena of providing assistance to their customers. After some of those political battles may have been fought and won, after you get the affordability program approved, and then after you take the next big step of getting it funded, low participation rates can really be an anticlimax. Not only can they be an anticlimax, but they can really undermine the whole program. And so next year, when the decision makers are talking or the budgets are being finalized, if you can't show that folks really use the program, then it may be a good program to cut in terms of kind of competing priorities at any government. So oftentimes there is the need out there, but outreach has been the problem, getting the message to the right folks. And there are some very entrenched, sort of bona fide problems with reaching these types of customers. There's another project that we're working on right now with the Water Research Foundation and APT Environmental, where we're looking at hard to reach customers, where if folks are living, for example, if they're not receiving a bill directly from the water utility, then it's really difficult to get information out that this affordability program exists. But you want to make sure that you're doing a lot of outreach so that you're getting in touch with the folks that really need to subscribe to the program. You want the subscription rates to be ideal, and that has been really a weak point, or the weak chain, the weak link in the chain, I should say, for a lot of existing affordability programs that we've seen out there. So some of the common outreach mechanisms are things like bill stuffers, but really public meetings, community affairs tend to be really relevant for this particular segment of your community or your customers. In terms of understanding how much an affordability program may cost your utility, there's another tool that we'll mention, and I show you at the bottom here how you can access that. It looks like this. It was funded through a Water Research Foundation project several years ago. But the idea is that there may be this question, there should be a question about how much is this program going to cost the utility if we do implement it. And we've seen that 1 to 2% of total user charge revenues. In some cases, we've seen that pretty often. But we actually have this customer assistance program cost estimation tool that can help the utility assess the cost and the benefits to their customer program. Once you know how much it's going to cost the utility, or you have an idea, funding sources become relevant. How are you going to finance this? And so the revenue generated directly from customer rates is a common way to fund these types of programs. But in some states, that is not an option. And we are doing a lot of work at the EFC at UNC about that right now. And if you're interested in keeping track of that, this URL here will kind of help you keep up with the work. That project is ongoing, and so the results are not out yet, but that's a good place to see when the results do come out. You can also use voluntary contributions, example, a bill roundup program, and so those have less restrictions from what we can see. And then emerging sources of income for this type of program, or revenue for this type of program, are things like rental income from cell phone and internet providers that use the utilities, towers, and tanks, so that rental income can be used to fund a program like this. And then we're seeing communities that use service line or insurance line protection programs to fund these types of affordability programs as well. Usually there's a third-party insurance company that works with the utility or the water system. Mentioning a few other EFC resources on affordability. So there is a blog, and if you click on this link, it kind of tags all the water affordability one. Right now we have 9 posts on this specific topic and counting. We expect several more posts to be put out over the next year or so. We also try to compile the different resources on affordability. So this particular compilation involves all of the environmental finance centers across the country and the work that they have done on affordability for water and wastewater services. In that compilation, you'll find tools, for example, these two here. We at the EFC at UNC worked on a project called Defining a Resilient Business Model for Water Utilities, and Chapter 4 in that document focuses on affordability in particular. And then the rates dashboards that we've done often have an affordability dial. And if you're not familiar with rates dashboards, I will give you this example here from, this one happens to be from Georgia, and it's current as of July 2016. You'll see that there's an affordability dial on most of our dashboards. So it's color-coded. 0 to 2% is color-coded as green, sort of a no cause for concern when it comes to affordability. 2 to 3% is colored yellow, meaning might warrant some attention. And then above 3%, we have red. You need to take some action. Just like, the dashboard on your car, it's probably when you need to get gas. But again, this color coding is a little bit subjective. The others are not exactly subjective, but this particular dial, the affordability dial as we call it, is subjective. And we have dashboards for about a dozen states. They are free online and they're open to the public. So if your state or a state you're interested in is in blue here, you can find a related dashboard that probably has an affordability dial, among many other things. But the dashboards compare rates against multiple characteristics, usually utility finances, characteristics of the system, the customer base, socioeconomic conditions, geography, sometimes even history. And we compare to similar utilities. We have pretty large samples in these databases. For example, Georgia, there are over 500 water utilities. And so you can look at comparisons. You can compare one utility to all the utilities in the state. You can compare one utility to similar service populations and that sort of thing, even distance from the utility in question. So those are usually fun to play around with. All right, so we'll talk now about other recent resources on designing customer assistance programs. There has been a lot of attention to this area recently, and we know that there are several other projects that are being funded right now and being developed, and so the results will be coming out over the next year or so. But one that came out earlier in 2016 is this compendium. It's called Compendium for short, but it's looking at customer assistance programs, and this one was funded by the Environmental Protection Agency's Water Infrastructure and Resiliency Finance Center, or WIFIC. And this compendium just lists many different examples of different types of water and wastewater customer assistance programs across the entire country. So it provides a good list. It provides information that was publicly available on these different customer assistance programs. So depending on the state you're in, you'll probably find some examples in there. Something that has not quite come out yet, but I mentioned the M1 manual, or the manual that AWWA calls Principles of Water Rates, Fees, and Charges. Right now, the 6th edition is out, and some of the quotes and definitions that you heard earlier in the webinar are from that 6th edition. But the 7th edition is due to come out in January of 2017. And that's significant because only a few chapters of this document, this manual, were actually updated. But there's been so much happening in the affordability arena. That's one of the handful of chapters that has been updated, and it's been significantly updated. So lots of resources and information will be coming out in that 7th edition, so stay tuned for that. And then at this point, I think we have saved some time for questions, but Savannah, do you want to take over with the polling questions at this point?
Of course. So I'm launching a poll right now, and our 4th polling question is, if you would like to subscribe to the Environmental Finance Center blog. If you want to sign up for the blog but did not have the opportunity to submit your polling answer right now, you can sign up for the blog on our efcnetwork.org website. I'm getting ready to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. And our final poll is, if you are a small water system of 10,000 or fewer, would you be interested in receiving in-depth technical assistance? And if you are unsure about technical assistance or did not have the opportunity to submit your polling answer, please review the technical assistance form on our efcnetwork.org website. Getting ready to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. And lastly, I am sending out a survey link in the chat box. Please take some time to tell us your thoughts on the webinar today, and you will also receive a follow-up email tomorrow with this survey link, as well as the link to the slides in the recording. Thank you for your time in advance. And right now, we are entering our question and answer portion of the webinar. Stacy, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right. Our first question is, assistance programs are not workable for small utilities. The need is too great and administrative costs are too high. Affordability is a function of level of service. Do you have any experience with reducing the level of service to reduce overall costs? Eliminating or reducing treatment, foregoing fire flow, etc.?
Well, those examples of level of service are critical. So fire flow, for instance, we want to make sure that we maintain that type of flow. It is a good point in that affordability programs have not been part of the bread and butter or the main line of business of water systems, especially small ones historically. We do have a lot of information showing that water and sewer rates are going up, in some cases twice the rate of inflation, and so they are increasing numbers of customers who are facing financial hardship, and they're having to make tough decisions between basic needs like food or healthcare and water service. So while water compared to other utilities like electricity usually or gas tends to be a little bit lower, it has been increasing, which is good on the one hand because we do need to make up some lost ground here. Water and wastewater has been historically underpriced in this country, and so there's a lot of infrastructure that hasn't been taken care of, and there's a huge infrastructure gap, in the trillions of dollars across the country. So we do need to make up. So it's good that the rates are going up, but the fact that they are going up, we are seeing more and more customers who can't really afford their bill when they have to, kind of compare paying the water bill or decide between paying the water bill and food or healthcare costs. That said, it's tough for a small system to implement something like this. And so my recommendation there would really be to focus on the slide that we talked about earlier where you partner with a social service group in your community, for instance. So a lot of times these organizations, whether they're a charity, the base of a church, or a human services organization, or some department within the government that already exists within the local government, they're dealing with customers who have, besides problems paying their water bill, they have problems paying their energy bill or their telecommunications bills or their rent in a lot of cases. And so kind of working with those providers may be the first step. Maybe you don't implement a full-blown customer assistance program through the water utility itself, but you work with those folks to help address the concerns when it comes to the water bills themselves. And sometimes that could be, let's say, something as simple as you have a company that wanted to use your water tower for their cell phone, putting their cell phone stuff on there. That is a nice discrete funding pot that hasn't historically existed in this industry. And so kind of carving those funds off and saying we're going to use that to assist our customers. Well, maybe you don't need, maybe it's just a few $1,000s a month, and that won't be enough to implement a full-blown assistance program. But working with a charity, let's say, in the community, providing those funds to them, for instance, and working with them on, how the bills are addressed for the low-income folks is a possibility. So you don't have to do all of these steps. Maybe we can start taking some basic steps in that direction. And then in a lot of cases, the low-income folks are the ones, or even tenants in some cases, are the ones who cannot afford to fix leaking toilets, for instance. Or working with some of those charity organizations, for instance, may help identify those types of customers that may have leaks in their house but can't afford to fix them. So that's, I think it's a good point, but at the same time, we are seeing increasing need to address this area in some way or the other.
Thank you, Stacy. And the next question is, with regards to the affordability assessment tool, is there a null input to put in for wastewater if we are water only, a null number, or a blank entry?
Yeah, you should be able to leave that blank. And if you're having problems, definitely feel free to contact us. But you should be able to leave the wastewater cells blank. And I should mention with that tool as well, if you don't find all the pieces of information for your specific community on the census, especially for the table 2, I believe, if you don't find all those specific pieces of data, instead of leaving those cells blank, do put a 0 in there, and that should help the tool to run better. But the main question about for wastewater, you should be able to leave those blank, and it should work just as well for water only.
Thank you. And the next question is, can you explain more about the alternative sources to pay for affordability? Service line protection program?
Okay, yeah, I did kind of run through that quickly, so I'm glad that someone mentioned that. So there are third-party companies that have been approaching water and wastewater utilities from what we've been told. So they are actually soliciting, and they are coming and contacting the utilities themselves, saying that we will help provide basically an insurance program to your residential customers. So I'll just throw in some numbers here to help provide an example. I know, for example, the city of Atlanta, which is a huge utility, definitely not small, but they do have a partnership with a third-party company. And obviously the third-party company makes some profits from this program, and they also pay something to the city, to the water utility. And then the water utility, in this case of Atlanta, turns around and uses that to fund their care and conserve affordability program. But the logistics are that the line from the meter to the house is the responsibility of the customer. It's not the responsibility of the utility. And so if there's a break in that line, what's called a service line, then the customer is on the hook to repair that. And it could be hundreds, or probably even a few $1,000s from my understanding. Anyway, these third-party companies ensure that. So let's say you would pay a premium of maybe $3 every month as a customer who has subscribed to that insurance program. And if something was to go wrong with that service line, you won't have to pay out of pocket for it. You have insurance on it, and so the third-party company would pay for those repairs. And so that is what I meant by that particular emerging source of funding for water assistance programs.
Wonderful. And the next question is somebody was wondering where they could obtain the AWWA manual.
Okay, and I might, since we have the capability to do this, I'll pull this up here.
Perfect. I will switch over for you to be the presenter.
Oh, okay. All right, so I'll just show my screen again. Basically, going to awww.org should get you to that website. And if we search for something like M1, it should take you to sort of a bookstore where you can actually find details of that document. And there is a new version of it that's supposed to be coming out. So this is the 6th edition that's available right now, but the 7th edition will be coming out early next year, 2017.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for our next question, capital improvement funding is generally available only if communities can afford to pay the operations and maintenance expenses needed to support the capital improvement. In California, due to special laws preventing publicly owned utilities from spreading costs among consumers, this prevents low-income communities from accessing needed capital improvement. Are you aware of any innovative approaches to assist disadvantaged communities to access O&M funding?
That is a tough situation. O&M is, if you look at a manual such as this one, the Principles of Water Rates, Fees and Charges, O&M really should be covered through the rates of the utility, ideally. But we understand that there are different things going on in the state of California right now where there are some limitations on that. And I'll point out this project. So this question is tough. If you can find a foundation, for instance, that's willing to cover O&M costs for your utility, then that's great. But usually that's not something that foundations want to focus on, unfortunately. And then if we look at the state revolving fund loan program, for instance, again, they like to focus on infrastructure, new infrastructure, and not O&M. So I'm afraid I don't have too many great suggestions in that case. It does remind me of this project that was mentioned in the webinar. Since this is specific to California, we are trying to put together a summary of what's allowed in each state when it comes to funding affordability programs. So eventually you'll see here this project called Opportunities and Affordability Assistance to Low-Income Customers of Water and Wastewater Service. You'll see that several associations, water associations, are funding this research, and eventually one of the deliverables, if you will, but it's not going to be until early next year as well, will be a summary for California and every other state about what are the legal barriers or policy barriers to implementing an affordability program. So to the specific question about O&M, that's really difficult, and I can't think of an example off the top of my head right now, but certainly if I do think of something, I can share that as an appendage to this webinar recording.
Thank you, Stacy. And another question is, what portion of cost is attributable to increased regulatory requirement?
Could you repeat the question, please, Savannah?
Of course. What portion of cost is attributable to increased regulatory requirement?
I think I need some more words in that question, but obviously they weren't provided, so you're just reading what you have. So it's looking at, so they're increasing regulations from EPA and sometimes at the state level, and once we have new regulations, then the cost to treat water to that new level, for instance, does go up. I don't have access to how much overall regulation affects the rate of water, and it would differ depending on the state, depending on the utility. So for example, if the source of the water that you're treating and delivering to your customers is groundwater as opposed to surface water, then the quality of the source of water with groundwater is usually a little bit higher than with surface water. So the treatment cost there would be lower. And some of the, I guess, newer regulations may not cost as much for a utility that's using groundwater versus surface water. But that is a big question. I'm not going to be able to say what proportion of even rate increases has to do with regulations. I think it would be pretty specific to the utility, and even at that level, at the utility level, kind of hard to define that.
Thank you, Stacy. At this time, I'm sorry, but we have run out of time for further questions, but we will be sure to follow up with those questions that have not been answered via email offline. I have documented every question that has been coming in. Thank you, Stacy, for the thorough presentation and a detailed look into the affordability assessment tool. We really appreciate your time here. Is there anything else you would like to say before we hop offline?
No, thanks for your attention and your great questions. And I believe that my contact information is up on the screen. And in terms of Twitter, we are starting a hashtag water affordability to sort of track all the affordability stuff that we're putting out. We just recently started that, but that's one way that you can kind of keep track of what's going on. Thanks, Savannah, and you can wrap up.
All right, wonderful. Everybody have a great day and enjoy the nice weather.